So, if you think that Ukraine can negotiate with Russia or Ukraine can just simply make peace with Russia, I don't know that it's possible. And I want to address that here. So I'm going to show you a few articles. This is just recently, last week, with Medvedev. Medvedev is a former president of Russia. And this was a week ago first. Ukraine is definitely Russia, rules out peace talks. Now, okay, I know you might be thinking, well, he is not Putin. Putin's actually the president. Medvedev is a former president. He may very well be a future president in Russia. Medvedev said this: "One of Ukraine's former leaders said at some point that Ukraine is not Russia," Medvedev said. "That concept needs to disappear forever. Ukraine is definitely Russia," he said to applause from his audience. Okay, so that was a week ago. So here's what he just said. Ukraine must declare, quote, complete and unconditional surrender, conduct demilitarization, dismiss all constitutional authorities, and immediately hold elections for a temporary parliament. He also claimed that Western countries recognize the Kyiv political regime as a Nazi junta. In addition, the Russian official believes that Ukraine must pay compensation to Russia. You heard that right. Not that Russia must pay compensation to Ukraine for what Russia has done to Ukraine in its invasion, but Ukraine must pay compensation to Russia. And then there was this quote: "This is a soft Russian peace formula. After all, this is a compromise position, isn't it? I believe that following it, we can come to a friendly consensus with the international community, including the Anglo-Saxon world, and conduct productive summits counting on the understanding of our close friends, namely our Western partners." That is the soft Russian peace formula. So what's the hard Russian peace formula? It's just destroying Ukraine outright. Okay, so here is Dmitry, a war translated, the so-called deputy chairman of the Security Council, Medvedev, suggests his 7 points for the capitulation of Ukraine, including full compensation to Russia and admitting that all Ukrainian territory belongs to Russia. Come and get it then. So far, you're all talk, and here's the actual document, and we'll read it in the English version. So, point number 1. Recognition by the former, hereinafter referred to as F, Ukraine, of the defeat in the military component of the conflict. So, first thing, Ukraine must admit defeat. Complete and unconditional surrender of former Ukraine, represented by the neo-Nazi clique in Kyiv. Demilitarization of the former Ukraine and the ban on the creation of paramilitary forces on its territories in the future. So, point number 1 is unconditional surrender and demilitarization so that they're not posing a threat to Russia ever again. Number 2, recognition of the Nazi character by the international community of the former Kyiv political regime and the forced denazification of all government bodies of Ukraine under UN control. Okay, so he wants to compel the international community to agree that Ukraine is actually, in fact, Nazi when it's not. That's going to be a trick. This is why this isn't going to work, and this is why you shouldn't take it seriously. Number 3, the UN statement of loss of former Ukraine of international legal entity and the impossibility of any of its legal successors joining military alliances without the consent of Russia. Okay, so the loss of international legal entity. So Ukraine was its own nation when the UN was formed. Like it was recognized as its own nation. Yes, part of the Soviet Union, but its own nation. And that sovereign status is lost. And they can't join any other alliances without the consent of Russia because Russia just wants to dominate Ukraine. 4, the resignation of all constitutional authorities of the former Ukraine. Let's stop there. So everyone in power needs to resign, and immediate holding of elections to the provisional parliament of the self-governing territory of the former Ukraine. Okay, now what would happen if all the people that were newly voted in, it was a real election, and they voted in the same kind of people that did not want to be part of Russia? Of course, that wouldn't happen because they'd have fraudulent elections, as they're about to over the next 3 days in Russia and in the occupied territories in Ukraine. Number 5, adoption by the Provisional Parliament of laws on the payment of all required compensation to Russia. So if you didn't hear that correctly, that's compensation to Russia for what Ukraine has done to Russia, not what Russia has done to Ukraine. So compensation to Russia, including payments to the relatives of all the dead citizens of our country and payments for the harm to the health of the wounded. Wow. Establishing a procedure for the compensation for property damage caused to the constituent entities of the Russian Federation. So not only are we going to hurt you, but then have you pay us for how we hurt you, is what that amounts to. Blaming the victim, that kind of thing. Number 6, official recognition by the interim parliament of former Ukraine that its entire entity is the territory of the Russian Federation. So the new interim parliament has to clearly agree that they are part of Russia, that they are not their own country, but part of Russia, part of the Russian Federation. And an adoption of an act of reunification of territories of Ukraine with Russia. So that'll never happen, but that's what they are demanding. And number 7, self-dissolution of the provincial parliament, UN recognition of the act of reunification. So they want to force the world's hand again to recognize this fraudulent behavior. And it's always fascinating to me how the Russians like to use these extraordinary extra legal means to give the veneer of legality to the illegal things they want to do. There's actually a bill in the Duma right now to revoke the 1954 giveaway by Khrushchev to Ukraine, of Crimea, that Crimea was gifted to Ukraine. So that tells us that Ukraine was its own country first, and then second, that Khrushchev actually did that, and third, that they want to say, no, we really didn't mean to do that, and fourth, and most important, it tells you that when they seized Ukraine and had an election, they're pretty uncomfortable with the idea that the world still doesn't recognize the illegal election, the fraudulent election that they had there, with 90+% of the population voting to secede from Ukraine. Sure, that really happened. Okay, let's keep going here. So the next thing that I want to point out is this. Dmitry has been at this for some time. He's done this, and he's done this map before. I saw this about a year and a half ago, but then last week he did it again, where this is what a new map of Russia would look like, and here's what's left of the Kyiv regime, and here's Poland all the way. This is the border of Ukraine here with Lviv and all this. Poland gets a big chunk, Romania gets a chunk. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, how do you make a deal with somebody who just wants to destroy you? I don't know that you can. And it'll upend the international order and create more problems down the line. So I want to show you 2 more things and we'll be done. There's a great question I just showed this morning in a previous video. How many of the countries incorporated into the USSR chose to join a new Russia-led empire back in 1991 when the Soviet Union broke up? Who went with Russia? Why? Why didn't they go with Russia? See, all Ukraine wants is what Sweden just got. This is a great metaphor, right? They just want to be under the umbrella. Now, if you go and look at your history, all the countries that were in the Warsaw Pact are now basically in NATO. They wanted to get away from Russia and be under NATO's umbrella. Ukraine does too. There's a reason for that. Ukraine can't make a deal with a country that's unwilling to acknowledge its very existence. Tell me what you think about this. Put it in the comments below. Thank you for your time, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.